Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Chris and Deb. I'm just going to make it a little cooler in here. I'm feeling hot. I know some people are feeling cold. I was feeling hot. All right. I'm going to start you off with a very serious story. When I was attending Unity for the first time about 20 years ago, Unity of Seattle, I remember a visiting minister came and she told this story about when she found her first church as a minister. Like, she was looking for jobs. When you look for a job as a Unity minister, you visit churches. She came to this church, and when she walked in, she knew it was her church because she smelled donuts. And she described how the second she walked through the door, the wafting, apparently this church actually made homemade donuts in the basement every Sunday. She walked in and she smelled the deliciousness, and she had some kind of come to Jesus moment about the donuts and where she was supposed to be, because apparently she felt not just happiness, but a little bit of a trigger, because there was something about donuts in her past. Now, and by the way, next Sunday is Donuts for Dads right here. I know, it's pertinent. But here's the funny thing. I remember that story so clearly, but I do not remember the spiritual principle that she was teaching us through the story. Here's what I remember. And I'm like, that was like one of the first times I ever walked into a Unity church. When I think of that story, here's what hits me. I want a donut. I want a donut. The universe has messages for us all the time. And they're personal. They're very, very personal. I kind of want to hammer in today that the universe has messages for you. You know, every single person here. There's countless messages, and they are going to be personal for you. So somebody's story may totally strike something in you, and that's why we talk to each other. I love that Zach kind of had this, was talking about the same idea. Like, what's your inspiration? What's your story? So I want to talk about some messages that the universe has for us. Do you remember a couple years ago, Dr. Emoto, the doctor who had messages from water? Well, water had a very important message for him. And you can I'm pretty sure everybody remembers the pictures of water crystals that he took with magnified water crystals after the water was talked to nicely or labeled with good things, or labeled with, I don't like you and stuff like that, and taken from pure mountain streams. And when I researched it, because I always like to research things like that and find out whether or not it was what we, I guess I just call it scientifically proven, or if it was just anecdotal and all that kind of thing. And I realized that it didn't actually matter to me so much about how much of a scientific study it was, because I got my message of, hey, here's pictures of water that are beautiful, beautiful crystals of water. And I already believe that my thoughts of happiness and joy and love and peace influence the way that I am, and influence my body, and influence my connections with people. So the water message is personal. So now how is it personal for you? There's going to be some people that won't like the message because it's not completely scientifically proven yet. They haven't done enough double-blind studies and all of that stuff. But there's people who are just going to look at those photographs and say, yeah, I'm going to hold the thought of happiness in my mind and my heart, and something beautiful will be created rather than something not so beautiful. This Bible writer, almost 3,000 years ago, found a message in a garden in the desert. "O you who dwell in the gardens, my companions are listening for your voice. Let me hear it." That's from the Song of Songs. And of course, many of us through the years have gotten all kinds of messages from reading Holy Scripture, Christian Scripture, and other Scripture. I was remembering a book called Mutant Message Down Under. Mutant Message Down Under, Marlo Morgan. That was the lady who ended up going on a walkabout in Australia with Aboriginal people, and she wrote a story about it. That how many people read that? Give me a little wave. Okay, yeah. So about half of you. So for the half of you that didn't read it, this woman was she showed up to meet with them, and they just took her on this trip for something like 3 to 6 months, walking about in the desert. And she had an amazing story about the things that happened to her and the messages that were available to her in the universe, that it seemed as if this group of people was choosing her to convey to the rest of us who were at home and didn't have to go on the long walkabout. And most of the messages were about our deep connection to spirit and the miracle of when you're in the presence, anything is possible. And of course, untold messages about what you come down to when you're in the desert with nothing, because she just went walking with them, just with absolutely nothing. I had a friend in Seattle who used to get messages from street people. In Seattle, we have the Pike Place Market. So whenever, and it would be a lot like the farmer's market here on Saturday. So whenever she felt like she needed a message from God, she would go to the Pike Place Market. And a person, a complete stranger, would come up to her, and some of them might sound a little bit, let's just see, they would be people who weren't your business three-piece suit person. They just looked a little different. And they might have sounded a little bit crazy, but they would come up to her and talk to her and have a conversation and give her a message that she needed. I actually saw it happen one time. A group of us were hanging out at the market. I think we're having lunch, and somebody just came up to her. She went aside with this person and came back with some absolutely personal knowledge message for her. And she felt like that was from the universe, telling her what she needed to do. I figure she had some kind of agreement about that. There's a biblical story about casting a fleece. And I'll be darned if I can remember. I think it might have been King David, but we're just going to pretend it was. You can all look it up later and let me know. Where you ask you ask God or the universe a question, and you do something, and you let you look for a sign. So the casting a fleece thing it had to do with some kind of war and army, and he threw the fleece out on the ground, and if the fleece was covered with dew in the morning, then it was yes. But he did it twice. So there was dew in the morning. This is, well, I'm going to do it the other way. I'm going to throw the fleece on the ground overnight, and if the fleece does not have dew in the morning, then that's indeed a yes, and God is talking to me. Well, it's a little game you can play, and if you have a clear intention about the knowledge is for your highest good and to be used for your highest good, you can have fun with the universe that way. I know people who make some kind of decisions like that they're curious about and say, okay, I'm going to need 3 green lights in a row. Ever done something like that? Okay. Well, and let me say, I'm calling it a game. I'm also saying that if your intention is clear and you bring in that wonderful phrase, highest good for all concerned, highest good for myself and everyone that's concerned with this, then you can trust. Whenever you say that, you can trust what comes up, what arises. The main point of all these messages from the universe, whether they are from a street person or a song or a, lambskin with water on it, the messages are for us, as everything is, to further our spiritual growth. Perfectly formulated so that we pay attention to what we need to pay attention to, so that we become the highest and the best people that we can be. Every single thing is for this. Every single thing that goes across your consciousness and that happens to you is here for you and I to become the Christ. Every little squeal, every little dancing baby, every little drop of rain, every gigantic hurricane, yes, all of it is just for you so that you can be the best version of yourself. A lot of my friends would get messages from Star Trek: The Next Generation, 20 years ago. It wasn't, there's something like people would, I must have been hanging out with some interesting people. It wasn't just the plot lines, and if you've ever seen that show, there are some higher thought plot lines, but they would come up with specific things. That was because they looked for it. What I want to stress again is you can write your own conversations with God. We have a study group, and people, including myself, have been given much guidance from that book. And the study group's meeting on Sunday at 9:30. But you can also write your own conversations with God. And I totally encourage you to do that. Everything is for yours and my spiritual awakening. Jesus said, "Let anyone with ears to hear listen." He was talking about one of his parables. This is the one where he talks about the parable of the sower. The sower throws seeds out. Some of the seeds land on the path. Some of the seeds are eaten by birds. Some of the seeds end up on rocky soil, and some of the seeds end up in the midst of thorns. And then, of course, there's the seeds that end up on the good soil. That is a pretty great parable. Most of us have some very clear and specific things about our own life. When was a time when a beautiful message from the universe landed in thorns with you? Or when was a time somebody told you something and it landed on the path? I have a couple of things that I feel actually quite irritated about that people were trying to tell me and I didn't listen to them. If I could go back in time and talk to younger Cynthia, I would say, say when she's 20, okay, do keep practicing yoga. Don't wait in 20, 30 more years. I would say that. And a few things that cracked me up. I can remember somebody trying to get me to go see Pema Chodron in Boulder a good 20 years ago. And I said, well, I've already got this thing going on with Sai Baba, so I'm just not going to go. And now that I really love to listen to Pema Chodron, it just kind of, Why didn't I do that? Do you have anything like that that God was really trying to get through you to? At one point, when I worked at Unity of Lakewood, every now and then I'd get books. Somebody would mail me books. It took one book to get mailed to me 3 times before I read it. And it was a really good book for me. And finally, after the 3rd time, I actually paid attention and read it. So now, and don't start inundating me, but now when I get a book and it just shows up, I read it because it's like, all right, I don't want to bypass what the universe has for me. So I know that all of you have things that the good word or the inspiration that's fallen on rocky ground, and that's okay because apparently that's part of what everything that happens is here for our spiritual awakening and our spiritual enlightenment. That's okay. But I just want to remind us again, kind of like what Zach said, today, what is your message from the universe? How will it show up? What will it be? What are you going to do with it? I want to pass on 2 messages to give you, as it were, a jumping off place for you to interpret your own personal message. I've been hitting the power of now on Wednesday. I keep saying Tuesday. On Wednesday at noon with a small group of people. We eat, we have lunch, and we talk about the power of now. And I'm amazed at how much the message is really helping me. And here's 2 beautiful phrases from there. Here's a part about consciousness. When being becomes conscious of itself, that's presence, okay? Think about that. When your being becomes conscious of itself, that's presence. And Tolle says, since being's consciousness and life are synonymous, we could say that presence means consciousness becoming conscious of itself, or life attaining self-consciousness. But don't get attached to the words. This is the really good part. Don't make an effort to understand this. There is nothing that you need to understand before you can become present. What? There is nothing that you need to understand before you can become present. Seriously? You don't even have to understand a single thing I say, or a single thing that you read, because it's actually just available to us to become present, to be the perfect unfolding of spirit in the world that you are meant to be. Just remind yourself of that. Maybe make a poster. There's nothing you need to understand before you become present. And then this last little bit, which I love this so much. Okay. And I would like to say, before I go on this, that I shared a 24th wedding anniversary with Roland yesterday. We were married 24 years. Mm-hmm. And the reason this is relevant is because this is what Mr. Tolle says. If you continue to pursue the goal of salvation through a relationship, you will be disillusioned again and again. But if you accept that the relationship is here to make you conscious instead of happy, then the relationship will offer you salvation. And you will be aligning yourself with the higher consciousness that wants to be born into this world. So, honey, I am not supposed to make you happy, and better news for you, you are not supposed to make me happy. We are supposed to make each other conscious. And that's not just true for my relationship with Roland. It's true for our relationship with everybody. Everybody. Our parents, our kids, our family, our cousins, our friends, our microphones. All of it is to make us conscious. That is really super awesome good news. It lets us all off the hook from keeping everybody happy and having to deal with the stuff that comes up. The stuff that comes up is the glory. It's all of it. So our relationships are here to make us conscious. And that's what we want to head off into our next path. Spiritual masters tell us over and over again, not just Jesus and not just the Buddha, but all the spiritual masters tell us that everything that arises, everything that happens is here for our spiritual evolution. Everything. I can't even. Okay, so, and that is the final word. Let's take an offering for unity.